The sun had just begun to dip behind the hills as I stepped out of the pickup truck, the scent of fresh hay and damp earth rising to meet me. My family's dairy farm hadn't changed much since I was last here. The barn still leaned slightly to one side, stubbornly refusing to collapse, and the air still carried that familiar mixture of cowhide, grass, and something sweet I could never name. Everything looked the same, but I was not. I came back under the guise of needing rest. A break, I told my husband, just for a few weeks. He barely looked up from his laptop when I said it. We hadn't touched in months. Our conversations had become clipped, transactional. I missed being seen, missed being wanted. I didn't know what I was searching for when I came back to the farm. I only knew I was empty. That's when I saw him. He was at the far end of the pasture, guiding a stubborn calf into the pen with a firm but gentle hand. He wore a faded shirt that clung to his back, soaked with sweat, and his jeans were stained from work. There was something raw and unaffected about him, something that pulled at me before I even knew his name. "Who's that?" I asked my uncle as we unloaded groceries into the kitchen. "That's Arun," he said. "Been with us for about a year. Quiet boy, but a hard worker." Arun. The name settled in my mind like a pebble dropped into still water, sending slow ripples through me. Over the next few days, I saw him often. Always working. Always silent. Sometimes he'd glance at me, eyes dark and unreadable, then look away as if he hadn't. It wasn't overt. It wasn't flirtation. But something was there. Something unspoken. One afternoon, I brought him a glass of water while he was repairing a fence. He looked surprised, but took it with a small nod. "Thank you," he said, voice low and soft. I watched him drink, his throat moving with each swallow. My gaze lingered too long. I knew it, and when our eyes met, just for a second, neither of us looked away. That night, I lay awake in the old farmhouse bed, listening to the distant lowing of cows and the rustle of wind through the trees. My husband had called earlier. I let it ring. What would I say, anyway? That I missed him? That I felt like a ghost in our home? No. He wouldn't understand. He never did. I turned onto my side and stared out the window. In the darkness, I pictured Arun's hands, rough from labor. I thought of the way he moved, deliberate, grounded. I thought of how he looked at me like I was someone, not something fading. And for the first time in months, I smiled, just a little. I didn't come here looking for anything, but something had begun. I could feel it, and I wasn't sure I wanted it to stop. The days grew warmer, and so did the space between us. Each morning, I found myself searching for him, watching from the window as he hauled bales of hay or led cattle to the troughs. There was a rhythm to his work, a quiet confidence. Arun moved like someone who knew his purpose. I envied that. I'd lost mine years ago. We began exchanging more than glances. A quiet hello, a shared smile, a moment of stillness in the middle of labor. It was all innocent on the surface. But beneath that, something simmered. I felt it when his fingers brushed mine as I handed him a tool. I heard it in the hesitation between our words. A silence thick with possibilities. I should have pulled away. I should have reminded myself who I was, a married woman, someone with responsibilities and vows.
But the truth was harsher than that.
I didn't feel married anymore. I hadn't for a long time. One afternoon, I found him repairing a wooden gate behind the barn. His shirt clung to him again, and his brow was slick with sweat. He didn't notice me at first. "You're always working," I said, trying to keep my tone light. He turned, a hint of a smile on his lips. "There's always work to do." "Come inside," I offered. "It's hot out here. You should take a break." There was a pause. Not long, but meaningful. Then he nodded. Inside the house, the air was cooler. I poured him a glass of lemonade, watching the way his hands curled around the glass. We sat in the kitchen, sunlight pooling around us in golden shafts. For a while, we didn't speak. "You like it here?" I asked. "I do," he said, eyes meeting mine. "It's peaceful. Simple." I stepped closer. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the loneliness finally breaking the dam I'd built around myself. But I reached for his hand. He looked at me, not confused, not startled. Just waiting. "Come with me," I said. I led him to the guest room, the same one I had slept in as a teenager. The door clicked shut behind us, louder than I expected. I turned to face him, heart racing. Slowly, deliberately, I placed my hands on his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath his shirt. He didn't move. Not away. Not closer. I began to unbutton his shirt, each click echoing in the stillness between us. When it slipped from his shoulders, I traced the line of his collarbone, my breath catching. His fingers moved then, lightly, hesitantly, toward the hem of my blouse. In that moment, there were no names, no history, just heat and hunger and the quiet knowledge that something had been set in motion. As his lips brushed mine, I knew this wouldn't be a one-time mistake. It had already become something more. What began as a moment of stolen desire soon evolved into routine, cloaked in secrecy, wrapped in thrill. Arun, and I no longer needed words. A glance across the pasture. A touch lingering longer than necessary. These were our signals, our promises. We met in hushed corners, the shed behind the tractor, the grove where wildflowers grew, the unused storage room near the milking station. Each encounter left my skin tingling and my mind clouded. It was as if I'd awoken after years of sleep, reborn into something reckless and alive. But beneath the pleasure, unease crept like ivy. I began checking my phone with dread. My husband had started calling more often, asking when I'd return, telling me about the bills, the meetings, the things that made up our distant life. I kept my responses vague. "I just need a little more time," I told him. "I'm finding peace here." It wasn't peace I'd found. It was escape. And Arun had become the embodiment of everything I'd craved: attention, tenderness, a sense of being wanted without condition. He changed, too. At first, he was quiet, hesitant. Now, he reached for me first. He whispered my name like a prayer. He left little notes tucked under the barn door, tiny, folded scraps with messages like, "Meet me where the trees bend," or, "You looked sad today." I noticed. One morning, I found a wildflower left on the porch, yellow, delicate, trembling in the breeze. I knew it was from him. But love, if that's what it was, cannot live in the light when it's born in shadows. We were nearly caught one afternoon. My cousin had come by to drop off supplies. I didn't hear the truck pull up while Arun and I were inside the tool shed. When I heard footsteps crunching gravel, my heart stopped. We pulled apart in panic, his hands still tangled in my shirt, my breath ragged. He slipped out the back unseen. Barely. I laughed it off when questioned, said I was cleaning. But my hands trembled for hours afterward. That night, Arun held me longer than usual. We lay on a bed of hay beneath the open sky, the stars indifferent witnesses above. "I don't want to lose this," he murmured. His words wrapped around me like a noose. I didn't answer. In the dark, the guilt bloomed. Not just for what I was doing, but for what I was becoming. A liar. A woman who hid behind smiles and silence. But still, I returned to him. I told myself it was just for now. Just until I figured things out. Just until I could breathe again. Yet every time he touched me, I slipped deeper into something I no longer controlled. And as I watched him fall asleep beside me, his face peaceful and unaware, I knew one truth. He wasn't just in my life now. He had become the shadow I carried. The illusion of control shattered the morning my husband arrived unannounced. I heard his voice before I saw him. Deep, familiar, cutting through the quiet rhythm of the farm like a blade. He stood by the front gate, suitcase in hand, smiling in that way people do when they're trying to fix something already broken. I hadn't seen him in months, yet I barely flinched. "I missed you," he said, hugging me stiffly. I lied. Me too. For 2 days, we played house, ate dinner together, walked the fields, pretended we remembered how to be us. But the space between us was colder than the silence. At night, he reached for me and I allowed it. I closed my eyes and waited for it to end. I thought of Arun's hands, of the way he breathed my name like a secret. The contrast was unbearable. Arun kept his distance, respectful, careful. But his eyes followed me when he thought I wasn't looking. I saw the question in them. What happens now? I didn't have an answer. That evening, after my husband went to bed, I stepped outside. The night air was heavy with moisture and the scent of honeysuckle. I followed the familiar path past the barn, across the gravel, and into the small clearing where we used to meet. He was already there, waiting as always. I saw his car, he said quietly. I know. You're leaving, aren't you? I paused. I don't know. He stepped closer, his presence anchoring me even as my world spun. I don't want this to end, he whispered. And I believed him. But belief wasn't enough. I touched his face, traced the curve of his jaw. This wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't plan for you. He smiled, sadness lingering in his eyes. You didn't have to. I found you anyway. We kissed under the stars, not like before, not hungry or desperate, but slow and filled with something that felt too close to goodbye. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen, making coffee while my husband scrolled through his phone. He asked if I'd be ready to leave soon. I said yes. But when I looked out the window, I saw Arun walking across the field, a shovel slung over his shoulder, his silhouette cutting a familiar path through the grass. And I knew I wasn't ready. I had built something with him. Not a future, not a promise, but a place to exist outside the confines of my life. And I wasn't done living there yet. My husband was speaking, but I wasn't listening. All I could think was, Arun will be out there again tomorrow, waiting, like a shadow I never asked for, but can't seem to let go.